May 6, 2025. The year is 2025, the month is May. At least, that's what the little blinking digital readout in the hallway says. The day number changes with some regularity, so I'm assuming it's correct. My name is Adam. I've been out of cryostasis for less than a week. I was part of an experiment that started in 1975 when I was 30 years old. The first men to be cryogenically preserved for future reanimation. I mean, who wouldn't want to be part of such a world-changing experiment? An experiment overseen by the best and the brightest scientists of our time. Teams of doctors, backed by the government of the United States of America. Nothing could go wrong. I spent years of my life, devoted every minute possible, to the study of cryostasis. Well, nah, you know what? That's about as far as I carry the bullshit. If I'm going to do this, I'm going to tell the truth. The truth is, well, I barely know what the hell cryostasis is. I could barely pronounce it. I'm a soldier, and I was part of an experiment. And I did go into it willingly in 1975, just after I turned 30 years old. That part was true. My reason is mostly to do with the money offered by the government. I'm not altruistic enough by nature just to wave my hand in the air volunteering for experiments that can make a better world for future generations. Or such nonsense. I care about the here and now. Which is ironic, considering my here and now is no longer where it was. I'm 50 years in the future, and I barely recognize anything I see. The idea was that 50 of us would volunteer. Our families would be well compensated and never want for anything. And we would wake up 50 years in the future and be studied for the rest of our natural lives. What no one figured on was the apocalypse happening while we were on ice. The deep underground facility in Washington state is enormous. We were awakened in groups of 10 over a 5-day period. I was in the first group, and everything seemed to be running automatically because there weren't any doctors and scientists running around anywhere like we thought there would have been. Like they thought too, back in 75. Come to think of it, I guess none of those same doctors and scientists would even be alive today. And if they were, they wouldn't be able to do much. It takes a while for your body to start behaving like your own again after half a century of stasis. But I finally feel like my old self again, and I'll start exploring the rest of the place. And the world soon enough, I hope. We're all just waiting for the green light from someone in charge, and surely they'll show up soon, or have one of their autopilot programs tell us what to do over the PA system. And I hope they hurry the hell up, though. The MREs are running low in our dorms. May 20th, 2025. Things are getting worse here. The food is running short and the other men are getting restless. I'm getting restless. I don't know how long we're expected to stay in our dorms and not enter the rooms with do not enter signs on them. There have been no announcements over the PA system and no doctors have shown up. I don't really know any of the others, and from what I can tell, they don't know each other. I wonder if the lack of supervision is part of the experiment, just to, see how we would react. If we would group up on our own and form a plan to get out, get food, or even get help. But doesn't much matter. I'm going to find a way out of the facility tomorrow. No one else said it out loud yet, but I know they must be thinking the same thing as me. What if they stuck us underground and forgot about us? I, for one, am not going to sit here like a rat in a cage and starve while waiting on some white coat who might or might not ever show up. May 29th, 2025. Well, it didn't take long to figure out we weren't in the same place we were 50 years ago. Some of the men decided to stay in the facility. They were convinced the waiting was part of the experiment, and like 5th graders anxious to pass a test, they refused to leave. Of course, none of us tried to force them to either. I was ready to go alone, but apparently a few others had the same idea, and I met up with them in the main tunnel. We followed the slight incline until it flattened out, and then we followed the signs on the walls. Flashlights were little good in the complete darkness where there were no overheads, and I thought it was a shame they hadn't cryogenically preserved the power from a few hundred batteries. Now, we didn't inspect the closed-off and empty rooms, or the smaller side tunnels as we went. We simply wanted out of the place, just to breathe fresh air and to see the sky again. Screw the contracts we'd sign. My plan was to reintegrate into society, disappear from the doctors and scientists and the government overlords to live as normal of a life as possible. Now, after walking an impossibly long time, it might have been several hours, or it could have been a whole day. There was no way to tell for sure without any clocks, watches, or sunlight to gauge it by. We came to the widening mouth of the tunnel. Stopping 100 feet from it, we looked at each other and then back at the opening. All but 2 of us ran for freedom, whooping and yelling excitedly like a bunch of kids at the last bell of the school year. But you see, something felt wrong about the dusky scene beyond. Maybe it was a vibe, a smell. I didn't know for sure, but I hung back wishing the others would be quieter. What if they drew unwanted attention? But from what? I wondered, taking a few steps back towards a support pillar. I flicked my light off and the other guy did the same, moving toward the opposite pillar. I lost him in the inky darkness and waited. I waited to see if the runners actually made it out. And in my mind, I could imagine spotlights flipping on, pinning them to the grass and sirens blaring into the open air. And if any dared to keep running, gunshots would ring out. First warnings and then the real deal. But instead, I heard the distinct sound of a chain-link fence rattling violently, and then curses and angry shouts from the group. And slowly, I made my way to where they were. A chain enclosure had been erected over the outermost part of the entrance. Perhaps to keep us in, I wondered. Had they really forgotten about us? The enclosure was about 60 feet long by 40 feet wide, and about 12 feet high. The wire had been stretched tight, and there were no loose places to push through. But there was a small gate close to the rock face of the tunnel entrance. It looked more like a doggy door than a gate designed for human use. A chain and padlock secured it from the outside. Using the butt of a flashlight, I beat the padlock until its rusted shank gave way, and I opened the gate. To fit through, I had to shimmy through on my belly, and the others followed. The surrounding area was covered in waist-high grass. Abandoned military vehicles stood as rusting husks, mostly camouflaged by the wild growth. The skyline at the western mountain was stained an ugly blood burgundy color as the last of the daylight disappeared and clouds moved in, and the air was deathly still. I had a cold chill run up me, in spite of the warmth and lack of a breeze. See, something wasn't right, and I know the others felt it because they stopped hollering and yelling and running. It was a smell. Definitely a smell that had set off my internal radar. Outside, it was more pronounced, and as soldiers, well, we all knew that smell. Walking in a defensive military formation, we made our collective way south, toward where we had come from decades ago. Not only had we been sealed in and forgotten, it seemed the world had been abandoned and forgotten. The gravel access road had been choked by weeds and grass and small new trees, and the whole thing stank of death. It was that pervasive, rotten smell that once you smell it, you never forget it. Stopping on a rise, we gathered to look toward town, but we saw no lights. Not a single light anywhere. One of the group suggested we keep walking until we reached the town we knew was supposed to be there. May 23rd, 2025. We found the town, or rather, what's left of it. Looks like fire has ravaged every building and almost every house. There's nobody left, though. The buildings that weren't gutted by flames years ago sat with boarded windows and blocked entrances. There was no getting inside. But we weren't alone. I didn't see anybody, but there was definitely somebody ambling around in the trash-choked back alleys and out in the woodlines surrounding the town. We needed to find food and somewhere to shelter, but we couldn't do either in town, so we decided to keep heading south. May 26, 2025. I was right. We weren't alone. We ran and hid where we could. Those things couldn't be real. That's what I thought, what I had hoped, and what I wanted to believe, but they're real all right. I don't know what they are, but they used to be people. Soldiers, to be precise. At least, if I were to judge by their tattered uniforms and the dog tags dangling around their necks. June 3rd, 2025. I've seen enough in the past week to make me doubt reality. I don't think I ever woke up from cryostasis, and I think maybe I died and went to hell. There's great hordes of shambling humanoid monsters sweeping across the land like a scourge, destroying and devouring every living, normal thing in their paths. Those things are dead, or should be dead, and in their graves, but they're not. They walk with half-rotten guts spilling out of their wasted bodies, flies all around them, and they never stop, never sleep or drink. They just keep moving forward, towards noises, even after the maggots have eaten their eyes, leaving nothing but a gaping, black, empty socket. Even when their noses are missing, and their heads lopped to one side because there's no more muscle and ligaments to hold them up. And how do you kill something that's already dead? How many living humans are left? We've not seen any, and just yesterday, we lost 2 of our group. But if there were no women left alive, what good would it do us to stay alive? If there are women, what good to procreate? Nothing could survive this hell. Nothing. June 27th, 2025. There are only 2 of us left alive, and we found out that if one of us is bitten by those slavering monstrosities out there, that we will turn into one of them within a few days. Is it a virus? Perhaps rabies, maybe. If it is, maybe there's a cure somewhere out there. We didn't risk trying to find others who might have survived, though. We headed back toward the underground facility. That was the only safe place we'd found. The MREs are dwindling, but the facility was huge. We could search it for more. A place that big had to have more than our little stockpile of food. The eventuality of death was given. We would either starve or be killed by those living dead creatures. You know, hope. Well, she's a cruel mistress. July 4th, 2025. The little digital flickering calendars on the walls say it's Independence Day. Ironic that on the day we should have celebrated freedom, Josh and I were scrambling back through a doggy door in a fence to get back inside our underground prison. That's what it was turned into. Prison. It doesn't matter if it was designed to keep those things out or to keep us in. The end result is the same. We were trapped. The group we had left behind had a million questions, and all we could do was give them more bad news and no answers. And as we sat to a shitty MRE, which, by the way, tasted like fruit from the trees in heaven, I noticed Josh rubbing his left ankle. And a few moments later, I noticed a smudge of blood under his left heel, pooling on the white tile. The overheads flickered, the only warning before they shut off for a few hours. I asked him what happened to his ankle, already knowing or at least suspecting the answer. He said that he had caught it on a broken piece of metal by the little gate we'd entered, but he refused to let me see it when I asked. His defensiveness became violent as I continued to question him, and he ended up throwing the remains of his meal at me before stomping out of the room. I had a moment of doubt, but even then I suspected. Soon none of us would be left. A virus, after all, spreads quick. I'll die without ever having answers to any of my questions about what the hell happened to civilization. This is Russ Engel, logging my findings for today. November 14th, 2175. The skeleton remains in the underground facility in Washington have been sealed and are loaded for transport back to my home base facility. The entries in the journal explain much about the state of civilization. A virus wiped out the living in the early 21st century. About that, the organization had been right. Deep underground bases or bases on the ocean were deemed the only places to survive. And so far, we found only a few survivors underground. In New Mexico, we found that people not only had survived, but had learned to live and flourish underground. So again, the organization had been right. The world I left behind when I entered Cryo in 2015 is a long one. Only vestiges of burned-out society, hulking, rusted ruins of once great civilization remain. There were roughly 500 of us put into cryostasis all across the country on the same day back then. The government was certain we would be the ones to repopulate the entire world after an impending apocalypse. A virus would wipe out civilization, they preached, or perhaps a nuclear war, but that was less likely. They recruited us through the internet, through games and websites and organizations, and yes, even us soldiers. The seekers who looked for answers to the internet's biggest viral riddles and mysteries. All of us have that much in common. All walks of life they thought were most appealing are represented with each separate group. Some were chosen because of their intelligence, others because of their hardy and healthy bloodlines. And me? I was chosen because I was a good soldier who would take orders, execute them, and never question. It seems things changed during cryostasis, though, because since I was reanimated last year, all I do is question. Not always aloud, but always in my head and heart. How did they foresee such a disaster? Had it been planned before? Say, before 1975? Was the virus manufactured in an attempt to whittle the population back down to an easily sustainable number of people? An optimal number of people, as written on the Georgia Guidestones? Or was it a fluke? A virus so evolved that even death of the host couldn't kill it, and cause the dead to walk, destroying the living, scouring the earth clean of humans. Until I have the answers, I will keep obeying my orders, going on recon missions and recording my findings in those little audio files as dictated by the governing body I suspect choreographed this whole horrible event. And until then, I'll keep killing the zombies. I mean, that's what they are, right? The living dead. I'm an antibody to the runaway virus. We all have our jobs, I suppose.